Stefanie Caccamo is an actor who's played the lead in a number of musicals but has always, until recently anyway, been uncomfortable with screen performance. But she has just completed her first 2 big gigs. One, the 12 on Binge with Sam Neill in the lead, and the other a 6-week contract on Home and Away. Anthony Sharpe's first significant TV role was in the Miss Fisher murder mysteries. And since then, he's built a list of Australian credits in series and features, and has also ventured to the US, where his most recent role involved doing scenes with Pierce Brosnan and Samuel L. Jackson. Both these actors are expert in the acting techniques explained in this book, and so I brought them together to discuss the experience of doing their first big gig.
I've been watching a bit of Wimbledon this year, and it's a really perfect illustration of the effect that stress has on performance, because you can see people going really, really well, and then suddenly there's an extra little factor and the tension cuts in, and then suddenly, they've been serving brilliantly first serves and suddenly they're doing double faults. And it's the same, it seems to me. It doesn't matter whether you're a sports person, an actor, or whatever your profession is, that stress is the biggest destroyer of performance that we know. And so it seemed, when thinking about it from the actor's point of view, that when that gig comes along that's stepping you up, it's a bit more important than anything before, or it's your first time on a big set, that inevitably there's going to be a level of stress that comes along with that, that's bound to have some effect on the performance. And so it seemed like this was an interesting topic to explore. And when I was chatting to Steph about her experiences on the 12, and she had lots of terrific stories, I thought, maybe we should get together. And then when I found out about Ant's experience, I went, oh, cool. Well, we've got 2 that have got something to contribute. But for those of you who've done classes with me, you would know that often in classes we talk about how to manage stress and so on. But this session is coming at it from a different angle. It's not from my point of view, it's from the actor's point of view as to how they coped with the unexpected, which can happen when it's new territory to you, and how they cope actually on the set rather than when it's just theoretical. So Anthony, we'll start with Steph and the 12. And Steph, before we get into the specifics of the challenges, how about, for those of us who don't know, you tell us about the premise of the show?
Yeah, it's a sort of murder mystery whodunit courtroom drama. It's called The 12. Sort of like The 12 Angry Men, I think, was an inspiration for it. And it sort of follows the lives of the murder case and who they believe did it, the court case, and then some of the lives of the 12 jury members. Yeah, so season 1 was set in Sydney. Sort of, very kind of modern and had a really sort of classical, cool tone to it. And season 2 is set in rural WA, so it's a much smaller community. The story it's really juicy because half of the jury are people from the community who know these people, maybe not personally, but we know of them. So it's navigating how to stay, impartial, and the sort of dramas that go on in our lives and how they intertwine with the murder case. And
we get the juries or or some of the jury's experiences running in parallel with the court case.
Yeah. So season 1 focused on 8 of the jury members. Season 2 focuses more closely on 4. And because it's a small town, our stories all intertwine as well. So it's quite incestuous.
All right. Well, we get the drift of it, but it must have been pretty exciting to be offered that gig, because you're one of the 4 jurors.
Yeah.
So what was the audition like?
So I self-taped, and that felt pretty comfy. Like she's the character's very sort of close to me, and laying it down was a little bit nerve-wracking, because when they feel really accessible, you kind of go, shit, these ones that feel really right don't come along very often. So taped for it, and interesting story. The director, Stevie Cruz Martin, who directed Safe Home, if anyone's seen Safe Home, The Tailings, she's a massive fan of the musical I was doing at the time in Melbourne, Once. And she watched my tape, did a little Google, saw I was doing Once, came along and saw the show, which was fantastic, because at that point I'd been doing it for 5 years, so it was well in the body. It was a well-oiled machine. So when I ended up getting the gig, side note, I was a little bit worried, because I was like, no, I'd been perfecting that role for 5 years. What have you done? You've made a mistake. After that experience, she we did a callback, and it was marvelous. I think she's an incredible director. She's all about laying down as many takes as possible, having them all be incredibly different, because when she gets into the editing room, that's when she likes to sort of piece everything together. She doesn't have she doesn't want a very solid, clear idea of what the show is. She likes to figure that out later. And so experiencing that in the audition room was amazing. We spent an hour on 2 scenes.
That's a big audition.
Yeah, and we just
And
had
you did lots of different versions?
so many. Sometimes they were improvised. My reader was amazing. She's an incredible improviser. And from that experience, she ended up actually getting the role of my mother. Kirsty McGregor was sort of like, this is a bit of a chemistry there that's working. Would you mind just jumping in the shot just for eye lines, sort of thing? And then she ended up she wasn't even auditioning. And we just got along really well. So.
And had you done an audition that was like that before?
No, not that long. No, not at all. Yeah, probably max like 20-25 minutes for a callback.
Right.
If even, yeah.
Okay. So already it was feeling a little bit different. Did that make it feel like a more important show? And did that generate stress?
Yeah, it did. I was so stressed. And I was so tired coming off the back of a show. I went to sleep at like midnight. But I guess that sort of grounded me, being tired. But ultimately, I felt like Stevie and I connected, and I sort of trusted her immediately. So in a way, yes, of course, I was stressed because it was feeling really good. And then when it's feeling really good, you're like, now I really want it. But for the most part, yeah, that trust was everything.
So you've got a story like that, a recent audition story like that, haven't you? But I was wondering whether there are other parallels too in the audition experience.
Yeah, look, in terms of that, there's in today's age, is very much more the self-tape, rules. The story that we had about the callback was actually I had to go in the room for the callback, and I haven't done that it's been so long since I've had to go in the room. So it was actually that thing of like, oh, wow. And I think there's a real difference when you're self-taping and doing that at home, that you can really create a character. You can play around with different things, but when you're in the room, you've also got to know that it's about relationships with the director, with the producers that are in the room. And I feel that it sort of becomes more of like a play, rather than when I'm doing the self-tape, I'm very aware of, like here's my my mid shot, and I'm working through. But when you're in the room, you're playing off people, and you're throwing your eye much, where your eye line would normally be like that, you're going to throw your eye line out there if that's where the person's sitting. But it is funny sometimes. If this particular one was, I came out and my agent said, "How'd you go?" And I said, "Oh, that's in the can. I got that one. That's in the bag for sure." And I just this one. And that wasn't the case, you know. And then other ones I've walked away going, you know, oh, that was terrible. God, what did I do then? And you get the call and you've got it. So you really never know. You know, it's a crazy. Yeah. Look, you know, I think you you're either right for the, you know, they're looking to fill a member of a family, whether that family be 12 jurors or whether that family be a bunch of street kids or a school. And I think that they see it inherently. And often when we're starting and starting that journey, that character is 80% of us, who we are. And I think that's what, whether you get the test right or wrong, I think it's really about, you know, how can they slot you into that family.
So once you've done the audition and you get the part, what was the next thing, Steph? Was it wardrobe?
Gosh, what was the next thing?
Or whether it was
It
next.
happened quite quickly, to be honest.
You remember your wardrobe calls? And I was just interested to know whether you were invited to have an input into that, or
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we worked with Terry. Can't remember Terry's last name. Beautiful Italian woman. Gosh, it must have just happened over in Perth. Yeah, it's actually a blur. You've said that, and I'm like, but yeah, no. I think it was, yeah. So, oh, sorry. I think the next thing was we got sent the first two scripts, and then we did a table read. And the costume fittings were in the same trip. So they flew most of the cast over to Perth. We read through the first two episodes, and it was either that day they decided they were going to dye my hair really dark, and then the next day costume fittings. And Terry had a great idea of what she wanted for the character for Claudia, and it was very my vibe. So there were no, you know, qualms there. I was like, yeah, great, 70s, like op shop, very the same. And yeah, I was pretty pleased. Like I said, she's very, very close to me. And so I was like, yep, that's right. That's correct.
and they're obviously reading you well, Steph. That's right, Anne. What were you going to say?
I was just going to ask you about the table read, how you enjoyed the table read, sometimes that can be a whole bunch of fun depending how you're feeling, or it can be, people can find that super nerve-wracking to be in the room, especially when there's bigger actors around and you're coming in, it's the first time you're meeting. How did you find that process, and what insights did it give you into the story and the script that you didn't have just from reading the script?
Yeah, it was a lot more. There was a lot more comedy than I had read. I'm quite sincere as a person, so everything's really like serious to me. And Sam Neill joined us on Zoom, and as soon as he started talking, the whole room was just in stitches. I was like, oh, this can be more than just a drama. Yeah, okay, cool. But I was terrified. And every time I said, because in the first episodes it's quite light on with dialogue. There's a lot of jury reactions, but in terms of actual dialogue, there wasn't much. So I only had what, 5 lines, and I just remember beating myself up after every line because I was like, oh shit. And sometimes it was just like, sometimes it was me just saying, yep, and I was like, fuck. But yeah, I think coming from theatre and then going into that, and no one was really pushing, and it was just nice to sort of do a table read that felt very human. And
Were they all on the same level at the table read? Because some actors do really flat reads at that point.
yeah, actually, yeah, there was one person who she's one of the main characters, and I've seen her work before and I love her, and she was so quiet. You could barely hear her. And I just remember going, oh my God, this is bizarre. What's going on here? And I mean, her performance was unbelievable. So it ended up growing into it. So I don't know whether that was her just sort of wanting to contain it, or I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, often actors have their own approach to that. And my attitude as a director was often, give us a bit, will you please? Because this is the last time I'm going to hear the story before we break it down into bits and I don't see it gathering in the edit room. So a reasonable level of read I found helpful, but some people would just do flat. And I would encourage a bit more, but I let everybody do what they wanted. to do.
Yeah, some people were really bold, like adding extra lines in or extra things, and Sarah Walker, the writer, was there. And I guess it's a good space to sort of just test the waters and try things like that. And if she wasn't happy with it, she can just let you know, sort of thing. So I guess it is a good start to just be like, let's just go to a 10 and then we can always take it back.
I think it's
So
great too to see the the really, you'll have the leads in the show and the experience in the show. And I remember back doing Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries and Essie Davies around the table, and she would, so you're all reading and everything, and you're working through, and then it'd come up to her line, and sometimes she would stop, and she's actually making notes, and she's like, "Oh, sorry, just a sec," because she had a great little thought and she wanted to pen that in. And for anyone that was new, you'd be like, "There's no way I'd do that. I've got to get my line. Don't hold it up." It's and the way she handled herself, and the way I've seen other people handle themselves like that. It's that really, once you're comfortable, they're just in their lounge room having a chat, and that's how they present with things. And I think it's really about getting in, being comfortable in that space and just sort of workshopping it, not trying to, get it right, so to speak.
So it seems like, Steph, that you've been given some permission to play and right from the start. And are you saying you weren't so confident with that at the start? But
Oh yeah. Like you never know how a writer wants the work to be presented, whether they want it word for word, whether they're okay with the push and the pull. But yeah, I think Sam Neill specifically sort of went straight in and improvised lines here and there, or would slightly change things. And then I noticed other people starting to do it. And yeah, I think Stevie was really supportive and encouraging in that way. She wanted everyone to feel very connected to the characters and very human. And she said, if anything doesn't resonate, like let's have a chat. Like you let me know what you think you want to say, and then we can chat to Sarah. And we had meetings with Sarah sort of along the way as well, and she was really open to that too.
Sarah was the script editor.
The one of the writers, yeah, Sarah Walker, yeah.
So it was really Sam that set the tone, was it? Because you hadn't.
Yeah. And he was the only recurring character from season 1, so I guess everyone sort of went into it a little hesitant, but he was just like,
Cool.
go for it. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Read-throughs on my list. That was a really good thing to talk about. Were there any other read-throughs, or was it just the first 2 episodes?
Just the first 2, yeah. But we did 3 blocks, and at each block we had a meeting with the new director, and we would read through all the scenes and have a good chat about it. So it was great.
Right. So you had a read-through for each block.
Yeah. One-on-one with the director and the script editor. Yeah.
Oh, cool. And other than that, that was all pretty ordinary. All right.
Rich, I just remembered, Terry, actually, the costume designer, called me before we went to Perth and asked me what I like to wear, what I feel most comfortable in, and then she sort of based my outfits on that. That just came to me. So, I mean, how amazing is that?
It's wonderful. It's sounding like a wonderfully supportive environment that they're all there to make your job comfortable and easy.
Yeah.
That's lovely to hear. So, what about the first day on set? Your first day on set?
My first day on set, yeah, it was, I think I filmed 4 or 5 scenes back to back, and they were all my private life, family stuff. We started with just a scene by myself that sort of ends episode 1. I'm coming home, put a box down, read a note that the family's out, walk into my sister's room, sit down on the bed, have a moment. So no dialogue. It was all just kind of movement. And I remember thinking before I started, gosh, I wonder if the theatre training is going to throw me off a little bit. But in fact, theatre is so technical, and having my first scene be something where, you have to hold, it feels really weird in the moment. You have to hold a prop at a certain angle so the camera can see it. So for you, you're like this, but really it looks like you're just looking at it, and putting down the box at a certain angle, sitting at bed, making sure if you're having a moment and you're looking over there that you know where the cat, like, it was so technical. And I just remember thinking, thank God for my theatre training, hit 12, hit this spotlight sort of thing. So that was actually it was pressure, because I didn't want to waste anyone's time with, getting anything technical wrong. But in a way, doing something by myself was such a nice sort of easing into the process. Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
And so did they get you to offer a run through of it before they started giving you technical information, or were you given points and from the start before you actually got on your feet?
No, I think it was, yeah, very collaborative. We just sort of said, this is the idea. And Stevie's very like that. She doesn't want to have anything planned. She just kind of wants to see what comes out organically. And then once we do a run through, then we kind of go, okay, good. We need to hit that point, that point, that point. So in the beginning, it feels quite natural, and then it becomes technical. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So the starting point was your offer.
Yeah, always. Really nice.
And that was the way it was through the entire shoot, was it?
Yeah, yeah.
Can I ask, Stevie, was Stevie the only director, or did you have different directors for each block?
Yeah, different blocks. So Stevie set up the show, cast everyone. So she was episode 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Block 3 different.
How did you? And hopefully, I'm not cutting in on any questions you've got later, Rich, by asking this. But did you find a big difference between the directors and how they worked, and how did that change things for you when you were working?
Yeah. I did find it different, and if it was jarring at first, but then it was a great way for me to sort of learn sort of different things about how I work and what I need, and how maybe I don't need as much as I think, and I can. It made me sort of learn to trust my instincts and trust my gut. No one cares about your character as much as you do. It's like the director has so many different characters to sort of take care of. And if you feel really passionately about something, you're the one that's going to fight for it the most. And so I think going from director to director and, being sort of the common denominator, obviously the directors are watching the episodes and they're staying up to date with everything. But you're kind of there the whole time. So you know the feeling, and you know the sort of through line the most, I think. So yeah.
Did you have that view before you started, Steph, or was that what you learnt along the way?
Oh, I learned that along the way. Yeah. I think working in theatre, you work with the director for 4 weeks. With this, it's much less. And then especially if you're changing directors and changing styles, just sort of got to learn how to adjust. And like I said, be aware, you remember as much as possible and be aware of what you've done in the past. So, continuity wise.
Which you're in charge of.
Yeah. And I haven't really felt that kind of responsibility before. And it was cool. It was scary as hell, but oh my God, I walked away from it being like, oh gosh, okay, I know what to do next time.
And of course, I don't know what your experience here is, but the next time can be quite different because it's a different director with a different way of doing things.
It's really can be quite a profound difference. I've had directors on the same series, and you got to remember too that the directors coming in, quite often you can be like, oh, I've got to, impress that director. I'm trying to get the next thing. Don't forget, a lot of the time, the director's coming into a show that is already running. It's not their show. They're not the lead director too. They're new. They're trying to find their feet as well, which is why you need to have your character and your, everything that you want to do. You need to have that down and know who you are and what you're trying to achieve. But I've had directors, from one episode where they're in and they're right, all right, what are we doing? How do you see this scene playing out? Right, let's do a walkthrough. And I'm like, what are we shooting first? What, and they're like, oh, where do you want to go? You tell me. And he goes, let's just throw it out there and then I'll follow you. And you're like, oh, great. And then went to the next director. He didn't want to speak to the actors at all. Just didn't. He was all camera, shot sizes, didn't have any input. And almost that you were sometimes searching going, is this going okay? And I think you've got to know within yourself that, this is what I'm doing. I'm listening to the other person. I know what my directives are. I know what I'm trying to achieve out of the scene, what I want from that person, again, conversation, goals, all of that sort of stuff. You get it, you lock it in, and you don't worry about that. If they've got a problem, they'll come and ask you. And it's about having that confidence to just do it, know that you're doing it good. And if there's a problem, they'll tell you. But as actors, we kind of want that you know, you do. You want that reassurance and you want that sort of feedback to feel good, to feel free. But sometimes you don't get it. Sometimes you get nothing, you know.
You've got to manage without it, which is where it's good to be confident in your skills, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's craft. It's getting that craft down, and just it is a craft, and you've got to work and work and work and work and work until you're confident and you're happy and you're comfortable, and then you are right to sort of do that much more.
I was chatting to Chris McQuaid, who plays the woman who's been murdered in it, and she said to me, "Darling, I've been left alone my entire career. You just got to know what you're doing." I was like, amazing. Yeah.
So did you work with Sam or Francis at all, Steph?
Not directly, just in the courtroom scenes, yeah. But I mean, that being in that sort of situation where it is like theater, you're in the jury box and you are watching these performances happen in front of you before the cameras are on you. It was like a masterclass. It was I'm so great. I've like got paid to just watch Sam and Francis and Faisal just work, and even like little technical things, like Sam having his sort of script there and like using it in the scene to ask questions, and if he's fumbles a line, he just pauses for a second, he remains so calm and he starts again, or even just realizing that because everything can be edited and cut together, it doesn't need to be a perfect performance from start to finish. I don't know if this is what Sam was doing, but he'd be talking and then maybe he'd think, "Oh, I didn't emphasize the right word," and he would just start the sentence again and emphasize a different word. They have both options for whatever they want to use. I was mind blown. It was like magic and so smooth, and yeah, I was just incredibly impressed. And
Even mentioned that if it was a complicated shot, like a tracking shot,
yeah, Sam would sort of pause and he'd look at beautiful Marty McGrath, a DOP, and just be like, "Back up, start again." It's just
so
awesome.
he just gave him a signal to
Yeah, a little signal, go
take the dog back and we'll go
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
No talk to distract, keeping focused on the job, arranging things the way he wanted, and then moving forward comfortably.
Yeah. And yeah, it's that was something I learned as well. It's not just about, your relationship with the director. It's with the director of photography, the ADs, because everyone is there helping each other. It's a big machine, and having those relationships, those interpersonal relationships, and just makes you more comfortable to do things like that because you're all on the same page, you're all speaking the same language. So if anything, there's so many different departments on set at all times, and it's so important to just get to know everyone, and so that you don't feel alone and that people can help you.
So watching Sam give himself permission to go again and just run in his time, and he's actually saving time by doing that, isn't he? He's not making them call cut and reslate and start again. He's just pushing things back and then confidently going on. But obviously also maintaining his concentration and focus within the energy of the scene at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what about different actors? And I'm not talking about in a critical sense, but were there different styles that you felt you needed to make adjustments to? Or you just stayed straight on course?
Not anything that springs to mind. Sure, maybe it's more dependent on the characters, I think, than the actor, but maybe they're one and the same. Like when I was doing my private life stuff, Italian family, sort of vibrant and bouncy and loud, and even my voice would change, which my voice changes when I'm at home and I'm around my family. My cousins, I become a little more like in the mask, and I'm like, "Nah, ma," and that. And then when I'm in the jury room, everyone's from different walks of life. You've got people from in town, out of town, sort of thing, and you think you need to talk in like a certain way, and so then naturally the performances change. But yeah, no, I thought we were really lucky, and I found that everyone was just listening to each other really beautifully, and everything was just sort of organic.
Well, what we've just heard, I think, is a lovely description of how things will change naturally if you're comfortable in your skin and listening and connected to the circumstances and the relationships. So, Anne, uh, you started off with Miss Fisher's mystery series in Melbourne, but you've also not only picked up various feature films around here, but done some work in the States. And so I don't know whether there are any sort of particular contrasts that you'd like to point to.
Yeah, after I did Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries quite a few years ago, and then more recently, it was actually, funnily enough, the start of COVID, and I was doing full-time musician, singer, and then lost all my gigs, and it was really funny. The closing of the door somehow really opened up the door with acting, just sort of took off, and I started booking multiple shows here, and I was doing, at one point I was doing two at the same time. I was doing Bay of Fires down in Tasmania and Black Snow up in northern Queensland. And so I got a whole run of really good shows here, and another show that's just about to come out, Human Error, on Channel 9, and started really feeling like I was getting my chops up, because I was working all the time, and a couple of local films, and then I landed the American thing when I first went over to America and got my visa, and I ended up getting on a television series over there. Can't even think of the bloody name of it now, and I got a couple of episodes on it, and I was so nervous, and I remember and I was just talking in the American accent, and I wasn't confident that my American accent was good. So I just was constantly talking. It came up really quick, like within 2 days of doing a test and then getting it and going in. And by all means, when I look back on it, the sets, because it wasn't a massive budget, and the sets actually weren't that big. I've been on much bigger sets here, but because it was American, and I was just so nervous. And I sort of, before even the scenes, I remember just sort of getting like just almost uncontrollable shakes, that I had to sort of try and breathe through, and I got through it okay, and it was okay. But that was before COVID, and then coming back to COVID and getting a run of shows over here, and then I landed Joe versus Carol, which was that Tiger King. They did a series on that, and that was probably the biggest set I've ever been on. It was a massive, even though it was shot up in Queensland. There was a lot of American, the majority of the big actors were American, and there was a massive crew. And walking onto that set was just like walking onto a big set. Hundreds of people, we had massive cranes, lighting rigs that were, the size of two houses up in the sky, shining down. And I remember they were telling me, I can't remember what the actual day rate for shoot was, and then someone broke it down to per hour what they were spending. So you're thinking that, if you're taking your time on a shot, that's what it is costing them. But it was a really interesting experience with that, and I got to know a lot of the American crew up there, because there was lockdowns and we all got stuck up there for literally months. So even all the big American actors, they were great. So we all ended up hanging out together and was able to really get to know them, so to feel more comfortable on set, get to see how they worked on set. And I think from that, I don't think I've ever had nerves on a set again after that. It just took them away, and I was just able to sort of walk on the set from, all the next ones from sort of day one and go, right, I'm on here, I'm doing my job, I know what I'm doing, and and I don't care. So I made a goal to try and play rather than to have a play with things and try things. And I might have this particular Joe versus Carol one, I was, didn't have a lot of roles, was in a lot of scenes, but didn't have a lot of roles. So I gave myself little, I thought, what would my character do in this scene? There's all this stuff in here. What can I do? And, and I just had my own little world going on as well as what was going on around me. And that was really fun. So that sort of set me up. And then, so then more recently, end of last year, I got a role in a Western over in Montana that was called The Unholy Trinity, and got to work with Samuel Jackson and Pierce Brosnan, which was super cool. Samuel Mother Jackson. And he does say that word as much as you think he would, which is just awesome. And
When you walked onto that set, was it still just relaxed? It was just
I
another
was,
set?
I was, I was. I was just excited, sort of more excitement now, and I just
Yeah.
he's there, and and that was the one that you'd sort of with these really big actors, and they're massive. Like you've got the people I've worked with here, like over there, it's next level how they're looked after and treated and all that sort of stuff on set, and there's a real hierarchy. In the US, you've got to stay in that hierarchy, and no, it's very much more pronounced than here.
Is that
And
inhibiting?
not really, just sort of know that that's what it is, but you're still totally, respected and everything. You just sort of, I don't know, there's a hierarchy and you fall into it. And he would like to come on set before he went into wardrobe, and he'd just like to do a read of the scene. And then he would go away, Sam, and then he would get, into wardrobe makeup, and then he would come back on and then do the scene. And just sort of seeing him work and that sort of gravitar that they have. And there was one scene where because him and my character didn't get along, and he sort of accuses me of something, and I'm sort of giving him the stink eye, and he's giving me the stink eye. And I remember there was just one take I was sitting there doing, and I was like, holy shit, I'm giving Samuel Jackson the stink eye. This is, and I'm trying to, I almost sort of dropped out of character because I was just like, this is fucking cool. So that was really great. And, and Pierce was really lovely. He was a real gentleman. Like Sam, you needed to have your stuff together, and he was no nonsense, and he would, he was there, but he was great. And I found for both of them, there was quite a big scene where Sam did a bit of talking, but then there was another lot of dialogue that was happening where he was just watching. And what can happen sometimes, especially overseas, is that they'll do all their lines to you, you give them everything, and then the actor will just disappear, and you'll get a reader that comes out and just reads it off a bit of paper, and then you've got to act off that and give everything back, and you got nothing, just a dead read on a piece of paper. Now, he didn't have any lines, and he stayed there throughout the scene and gave eye lines, and I found when I had my particular parts for it that he would just watch me the whole time. So whenever I looked to him, he was there and he gave an eye line. And I really respected him for that, because I think that's
Impressed, yeah, because that other bullshit practice of, oh, I've done my stuff now.
and I'll go, yeah. So he was great by me, and yeah, and Pierce likewise. Pierce was great, and Pierce, he would have a bit more of a chat, and he was very much a gentleman, like you'd sort of imagine him to be. It was just great fun. It was, shooting guns, running around on a Western. I mean, it's every boy's dream,
Mm.
Steph,
Yeah.
you ever thought about what Ant was saying there?
Oh yeah, I know. I've a couple of things. I've heard of that happening, and that just blows my mind. Because not being able to respond and to listen to the other person who's obviously giving you the 100 and the performance that they, the character, it just blows my fucking mind. But similar thing when we were shooting the 12. So they've got to shoot the jury, they've got to shoot Sam, Faisal, and oh my gosh, my brain. Francis. Then they've got to shoot the reporters, the judge, and the audience members, the people who are just the general public. So that's a lot of shots that they got to get right. And so we filmed that, I think, half a day it took to do that one scene. And Amy performed at 100% for everyone else for every single take. It was
Wow.
fucked up. And like we got to the end of the day, they called it end of scene, and Sam Neill and everyone just like stood up and just applauded her. It was one of the most remarkable things I've witnessed. I have no idea how she accessed that time and time and time again. Yeah, because after a few takes, I just feel like my gas is out and I've got nothing left, and I'm like, ugh. But I don't know. She was just like in another gear.
Yeah, there's the Jack Nicholson story, isn't there, about him doing that in that courtroom scene. I forgot.
Mm.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And similarly, there's a story like at the read through. Well, what's the name of the film? That everybody's sort of doing a read, and when Jack did his first line, everyone goes, "Oh fuck, right, that's where we're at." They're all,
Yeah. Wow.
He set the tone again. Yeah,
No, was
cool.
that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? No.
No,
A Few Good Men.
No, that's been so long like it.
A Few Good Men.
yes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Great film.
Yeah.
Just in terms to self-tapes, is that something pre-recorded or you do live?
If it's if I can jump in and answer this one, you'll generally do your first self-tape. This is actually, I thought I'd turn this on rather than going through my camera. This is my setup at the moment. So I've got at home, I've got my key light here and a couple of lights behind, and I've got like an SLR camera that I use. Generally, you do your first self-test, which will be at home, or wherever going into a studio or whatever. And sometimes you can get a callback, and you will then do that via Zoom if you don't go in the room, which is happening more and more, especially if it's overseas. I had to do once for a show, American show. I had to do a what's it called? When at chemistry read, they call that a chemistry. It's like a callback, but with the lead actress, and she was from Parks and Rec. Just trying to think of her name. The black lady off that show. Oh God, she's bloody wonderful, and she did it at the show The Good Girls, and I had to do a chemistry read with her. And I've now, when I'm looking on the computer, I've got to wear the glasses, to sort of be able to see. I'm fine with when it's not a screen, but I didn't want to wear them for this bloody this test. So I had the computer there, took my glasses off, and literally she was just a blurry blob on the screen. I'm thinking, I'm trying to do a chemistry read here overseas, and literally it was just a look in that direction, which was horrible. So if you can ever get in the room for a callback, I think it's much more. But generally, self-tape it. First self-tape is at home or in a studio, and then callbacks can be via Zoom, or you will go back into the room to do it. And it's a different approach.
When you're doing your self-tape, you get a reader and someone in to read for you in the space, do you?
Yes. Yeah. Look, I do that sometimes when I can, or my wife, if not, and then sometimes my 15-year-old daughter will come in and read. But I've got a friend that we often do a lot of swaps, and he lives locally, so we do that. But I've even had as soon as I finish tonight, I've got to get a tape off tonight once I'm finished here. But sometimes when there's no one around, and I'll literally get a mark on the wall for eye lines, if there's a couple of people in the scene, and I'll literally do my line, and then I don't like to play a recording back, and I'll do their line in my head roughly, and then I'll do my next line and then do it that way, and then I'll go in after and I'll just voice over in the gap with the line. I mean, and again, this comes back to that camera technique and the fact that when you're on set, sometimes you're watching someone cry, break down, laugh or whatever, and watching something incredible. They're watching a camera and a crew. They're not watching what you think they're watching. So if you can't do that in a self-tape room, then you need to learn how to do it, and you need to learn the technicalities of working this way, because it's not theatre, it's frame size, it's eye line, it's all of these things that are there's story and character, and all of those things that we've got to get through, relationships, and just sorry to you don't want to get in too much in the nitty-gritty, but self-tapes, and I love self-tapes. So really, taping at home has been the best thing that ever happened for me anyway. But you can't tell the story, and everyone's going to do what's in the big print. You need to look for the relationship with the most important person that's in that scene, and that's all you can get across. It doesn't matter. You don't need backstory. You don't need all of those things, because it's for me, it's bullshit. Like, you can have some things there, but it's about a relationship with one particular person, and maybe others, but one mainly, and you need to be able to get that relationship across, if that makes sense, and create a character. And I often get the dialogue down. I don't even look at the big print, and I do now. I've gotten it's so bad or so good, whichever way you want. But I throw all the big print out, and I'm not doing anything when the big print says, and my success rate from doing that has jumped massively, and I make bolder choices, and I'll come in and I get the dialogue down really quick, And then I'm just all about, shit, what could I do? What sort of character could I do with this? And then how do I feel about that other person, that I'm going to be doing it with, and just go in hard on something. And quite often I'll be like, that's not what we want for that character, but man, we loved him and we're going to get you in on this other tape for this show or this one or this one. So that's a long answer, but that's some of the things I think that are important.
Remember the point when you said to me, casting directors were starting to say to you, oh, you're auditioning for this. I'm looking for, I've got something to look forward to, because they knew you were going to throw something up that was different.
It was. And look, and I remember someone saying, it might have been you, Rich, or someone said to me, an audience watching a television show, they haven't seen the show or the movie or whatever it is. Everything that's happening is new. This is the only time. Auditioning isn't acting, it's auditioning. It's different. It is acting, but it isn't exactly the same. And the audience knows every single beat in that script. Now, anyone who's auditioning for that is good. If you're not good, you're not getting the bloody test. 90% are going to be good. But you know what they do is they start right in the middle of the screen, and they deliver a really strong performance that they feel great about, and they emote, and it all feels good here. But it's the same bloody thing again and again. And that director and that casting director, they know every beat, and they're bored. They're watching one after the other. And they now, with the way that they do it, with watching self-tapes, they can click it and they can click off you in 10, 15 seconds. So one, visually, you don't go full crazy and get the whole thing going on, but really have a hint of what that character is going to be. And you need to make strong choices, and choices that aren't in the scene, not stupid choices that are ridiculous. So I remember one guy's turned around, he's facing the back wall to do something different. That's kind of stupid pretty much for the whole test, So good, solid choices, not crazy choices. And the more they get to know you, and they know that you're good, the more you can have a bit of play with things. If they don't know you, be a little bit careful. But
it's seeing your playful qualities. Now, Owen, I know you've got a question, I think, but Elizabeth also wanted to ask. Are you there, Elizabeth?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Anthony about what it was like working on a local production like Bay of Fires, which I really loved.
Oh, it was great. And it was Elizabeth. Is it? Hi, Elizabeth. It was great fun. That was, and again, that was when I was working on Black Snow up in northern Queensland. So I was doing these massive all-day run plane rides, because they both were fighting over the schedules of who sort of got me. And I think Black Snow had preference, I was first choice. So I'd jump on the plane, head down there on that. But that was a crazy experience. It was shot down in Queenstown, very remote, 3 hours in by bus. And it was a really big ensemble cast, that one. So there's a lot of people in there and real big characters. And it was very much, all the characters were larger than life. So, you had a bit more of a chance to sort of play and do more on that particular show. But it was that was one. It was a funny story with that one. Like I was the bus driver, the crazy bus driver, and was sort of a dope smoker, which was funny. I didn't find out that I was a dope smoker until about halfway through. There was another piece that they gave me, because it was we didn't, you don't always get all the scripts for all the episodes until, as you're going along, because sometimes they're playing catch up. So I was like, oh, okay, that's an important note that I didn't get. So I didn't really want to change things too much. But my character drove the school bus, and it was a 30-seater school bus. So I went out and got my heavy rigid truck license to be able to drive this bus. And this was my first scene, was with Marta Dusseldorp. And it's always that thing when you're working with the lead, you want to be, again, I don't think I get nervous anymore, but I want to do good work and be feeling good about the work that I'm putting out. So the first scene was in this bus driving down a mountain cliff road, and the drops off this thing were, if you watch it, they'd kill you. And I had to be speeding down the mountain doing a monologue. So I'm not even doing a back and forth talk. It's a sort of a monologue where I'm just blah, blah, blah. I've got real school kids in the back of the bus. I'm in sort of second gear, and so that I'm not going too fast, but it's still going pretty quick, and just really on and then on and off, and sort of swerving down and having this thing with Marta. It was the first time I'd sort of met her, and I just remember that I was just like, fucking hell, this is doing the what the rubbing the stomach and tapping the head at the same time. And I love to be doing in a scene, but that was next level that I was, because I'd never driven. I had 1 hour, I think I had between half an hour and an hour to learn how to drive that bus with the stunt driving guy, and then we were up on that hill, and I was going down and up and down this mountain doing the lines. It was full on, but I mean, it was awesome. That's the dream stuff. I love about that show is that which is my favorite thing. Like, I love being out in crazy locations, and everything sort of is there for you visually, and you're sort of in amongst it, moving around from location to location has always been something that I've loved, as opposed to ones where you're sort of in the studio, and I'm not a big in the studio fan. It gets a bit boring. I don't know. I love being out.
Owen, what was your question?
Yeah, g'day. Steph, I had a question for you. Chimed in on Home and Away in the story about Bronte, I believe, your character, with the parents, and then onto the 12 the same night. So, and again, I don't think you're in it yet at that point, because Mum and Dad were talking about it and that you're in Home and Away and that sort of thing. But anyway, question's completely different. Sam Neill being ill, is he affected at all? Because it doesn't seem like it. He seems brilliant and as usual, but I believe being unwell, how does he not let that detract from his roles, like from what you've seen? And is it just business as usual?
That's what it appeared. I don't know what was going on behind scenes. I can't imagine it would have been easy, but when he came into work, he came to work. And sure, he may have I haven't worked with him before, and I didn't know him as a person before. I've just heard that he was really lovely to work with, very generous. But it seemed from the outside that, he kept his composure, and he stayed quite reserved, and he saved his energy for what mattered. Was still being polite with everyone. Yeah, it was interesting. I didn't get the opportunity to really get to know him as a person, but as an actor, which, it sort of says how much it's testament to his character as a person. When the cameras were on us as jury members, he would often, and he had like a big testimony or a big speech monologue, he would often like quadruple the time it took to say that bit of dialogue, and it appeared as though he was trying to get just as much coverage of the jury as possible, and he would add in lines, and he would improvise, try to make us laugh, so we'd all have sort of different reactions, and I just thought it was incredibly generous of him. But yeah, to have space to do that, to be thinking of others in that way when you're going through what you're going through, it's just remarkable.
Cool. Vivian, what was your question?
I just the first time opportunity to ask somebody who's done that. It's sort of, do you actually have rehearsals prior to those scenes? I mean, some of those scenes were quite heavy in many respects. Do you have a walkthrough? Do you have a sort of enough time to get to know the other actors? Because that whole storyline was very compulsive viewing, really. Mostly because it does affect people of an older, when people get taken for the ride and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's quite relevant,
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of my own preparation, I worked with an acting coach, Anthony Brendan Wong, just to sort of figure out her backstory and to be able to justify why she does the awful things that she does, where she feels justified in those choices. And we worked on that. We had a couple really, really strong sessions just working on her background.
And was that funded by the production, or did you?
No, I just did that myself. Yeah, I've worked with Anthony on the 12, and we had a good rapport, and I did one of his workshops in Perth, so we had a good relationship.
And that in itself is an interesting thing to take note of, but this is a long time ago now since I've been on a working set, but I would often ask the production for a special call, and generally they would go, no, we won't pay the money.
I could have asked the question. I think as a guest actor, I felt very hesitant to ask for anything.
I remember on Neighbours years and years ago that I was on doing stuff on that, and if you stood in the right place and didn't get your lines wrong, that was all you got. They
love you. They love you when you do that. Yeah.
But, yeah, you know, but like it's just there's no way if you went, oh, I'd love to try, they'd be like, nah, moving on, because the hours they've got to shoot. Yeah, they've got it. It's crazy. I don't know what it is. There's a certain thing they shoot, however many finished minutes per day. Richard probably be able to answer this better than me, but some shows might be, 10 minutes a day. Others might be, 5. Others might be 30. It just depends.
Yeah. In terms of Viv's question, rehearsal.
Yeah, so for the most part we did. Yeah, there was only like a little chunk in the middle there where we didn't have time to do rehearsal, and that's just because there are so many different storylines going on. But yeah, Lynn McGranger loves rehearsal, so whenever she pushed for it, we were like, "Yep, amazing!" And yeah,
is this Home and Away we're talking about? Or?
Yeah. Lynn McGranger, who plays Irene on the show, she's been on the show. Yeah. So she's wonderful, the fact that she's been on it for so long and she just still loves rehearsing. And she was like, I made a point as me being a guest actor to make sure that I had rehearsals too. I thought that was really nice. But it wasn't really rehearsals. They were more just like table reads, read through it, and if you have any issues, then address it. On the day, we always do a rehearsal, like a bit of a walkthrough. Directors usually had an idea of what they wanted you to do. You could kind of push and pull. I was actually really surprised. I was told to make sure that I do everything, don't change a word, don't do any, sort of thing. But we had a great time. Again, similar situation in the read-throughs. The actors were all kind of pushing and pulling here with ideas and with dialogue. And for the most part, I felt really, really free to kind of make her my own, which I loved. But, all in all, it was the fastest process I've ever been a part of. I had huge doubts the whole time whether what I was doing was good. Sometimes shooting 9 scenes back to back from 6 till 6, and you don't get the scripts until the Friday for the following week. So you might have you might have 1 or 2 scenes in that week, or you might have, sometimes I had 32, I think was the most scenes I shot in 1 week. And just
it's really doing your trade, isn't it? Like it's really learning to trade, the Home and Away and Neighbours and stuff. Like it's real good. Like
that. I came out of that being like, I can learn a scene like this now. Sometimes, I got an email in the evening one night saying, we've just edited that episode. It's a little short, so we're writing an extra scene from something you did like 3 weeks ago, and we're going to film it after lunch. And in situations like that, I found a lot of the actors on that were really generous. And I sat down with Linny during lunch and we just like ran it. And super quick, very different, much more technical. That's definitely a situation where you got to know what you're doing and you got to go in strong, make bold choices. Otherwise, sometimes it's only one take and done. My first day on set was 1 take and done. Shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is worthwhile talking about, Steph, is the experience you've had since completing the production.
Yeah.
With the response from the audience.
Yeah, it's been interesting. In the beginning, it was kind of fun, and then after a while, it did become a little strange, and has made me sort of rethink a lot of things. Just about this day and age and social media and playing villains. Especially when things started to ramp up towards the end. I made sure, and I made this conscious choice, and I'll continue to make this choice, to not go on social media and search for things about the show or me or any public forums, and that was good. But I didn't anticipate that people would send me direct messages or comment on my posts. Quite abusive things. And that, the fan base, they love it. It's like these characters are their family members, and they take everything very personally. And the other actors on the show had warned me about that. And I mean, I respect it. And I know that a lot of the comments were, them responding to the storyline and the character. But when they're saying, you and karma's going to get off the show, no one likes you, things like that, you're just like, oh, this is a lot.
A
Yeah,
real
so
Draco Malfoy.
Yes.
very much, very much. And look, I get it. The character did some horrible things. It was, as an actor, incredibly fun to play. The most fun. Yeah, it's always interesting. And I've had, thoughts from this going, gosh, like I'm it's not going to stop me from auditioning for similar roles, because I find these characters who are the hardest to understand, the most interesting to delve into. But it did make me think a second, yeah, maybe I just shouldn't do that moving forward. That's a lot to sort of,
Because it was so unpleasant.
yeah. But ultimately, no, I think I've just decided I'm just going to shift my relationship with social media, limit it, because it's not a normal thing. It's a really crazy, toxic kind of just vacuum of negativity sometimes. You don't need it. You don't need it.
So there's one other thing before we close, I think that I found interesting was that because of the particular behaviours of this character, as I understand it, you really created two characters. Is that the way you would describe it? So that you had different tactics for different moments in relationships.
Yeah. So for majority of the shooting, I was manipulating these people and convincing them that I had a terminal illness and that I needed their help. So a majority of the scenes were that. And I just thought, well, I can't possibly be thinking the whole time, 90% of this filming, that I'm scamming these people. I need to believe it myself. The character's name was Bronte, and I sort of figured this out with Anthony Brendan Wong, my acting coach on the show. Let's create the character of Brandy, who I played for most of the time, where she was actually dying. So it felt interesting to sort of prep two different characters for the one piece. And I'd write at the top of my scripts, okay, this is Brandy. Sometimes it was Brandy and then Bronte would come in at the end, and I would just write where that shift was. Because I think that was Anthony sort of said to me, like, you can't do the villain wink thing with this to be believable. You've got to believe it. Brandy, I used my sort of own life experiences to add to, finding that emotion and then what it would be like to be ill and the physical changes and things like that. And then Bronte was where we had to create a lot of backstory. So in a way it was an interesting sort of experiment, and I think it kind of worked. It's funny because watching it back and watching, how they've edited it and the music, I'm like, oh my God, that's not what happened in that scene. I was so genuine, and that was a beautiful scene in my mind because it was so real to me. But the way that they edit it, you're just a villain. So I can't even imagine what would have happened had I not, been that invested in this Brandy character. There's just no way it would have been believable.
Cool. Well done. I've been keeping a bit of an eye on your home and away performance. I've just been skipping through to look at your scenes. But you did a terrific job there, Steph, as well as the little bit I've seen in the 12. And thank you so much. I've actually really enjoyed the session, and I think there's been a lot of really helpful information for people as to what to expect under these circumstances. And Steph, last example of the home and away character, of the stresses of that role were how to try and create the dichotomy of her behaviour, and that's the actor's job, isn't it? Is to see where the problems are and nut out a way to a path to find your way through it. I was really impressed with that tactic, and I think it's also interesting to note that when you need to, hiring help is money well spent. It was a couple of days, was it? You worked on it, Steph?
Yeah, a couple of sessions we spent on it.
Yeah, cool. Well done. It's been a lovely night, thank you. It was a variety of information along the way. Thank you to everybody who's participated. It's been lovely to see you all. And special thanks to Steph and Anthony for a terrific night. Well done.
Right. Thanks for having us. Cheers.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Thanks. Thanks for your honesty.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks all.
No worries. Good night.